certainly as a director of a garden, I felt somewhat isolated and had the need to reach out to my peers. Fortunately, the Earl Burns Miller Japanese garden is in Southern California, and there's so many adjacent gardens, particularly the Huntington and the San Diego Friendship Japanese Garden. And I'm sure anyone who's managed a garden has been, on the phone or going to visit their peers, because there's such a plethora of challenges and opportunities at these gardens, and there's no sort of preparatory course that you're going to take that's going to, provide you with what you need. So I was also fortunate that Ken Brown, with his groundbreaking research on Japanese gardens outside Japan, was a colleague and taught on the campus. And so it became kind of obvious that there was an opportunity. And Ken really articulated it to me first in the idea of having a conference. And now I'm going to throw the ball over to Ken to kind of, because I think the conference played a key role in the formation of NAJGA and kind of getting our thoughts together. And some things happened at that conference that include Steve. So Ken, let me pass it on to you.
All right. I do remember the sort of, let's call it the deep impetus was my wife and I would travel to all of these gardens around the country, coast to coast. In 1996, we went from Atlanta to New Orleans to Minneapolis to New York, back to Atlanta, looking at gardens. At 2005, we drove from Washington to Montreal to LA, 30 days looking at gardens. And I just realized that they weren't connecting, that the issue that you articulated, Jeanette, was true of everywhere. And unlike you, and I think obviously Steve, who was already reaching out, making connections with Japan, the people had no clue. And often they were really isolated. There was no garden within 75, 150, 250 miles. And the shocking thing to me is if there was a garden nearby, they didn't know about it.
Yeah.
And it just struck me, and the over and over again, I saw the same problems, and in a way, the same sort of mistakes. We planted this because we went to Kyoto and it grew there, and wow, it doesn't grow here. And I just thought, well, shouldn't you really connect with others who are having these same challenges? So that was my deep feeling why we needed to do a conference to bring people together to start to make the connections. How that all grew into an organization, maybe Steve can help us remember.
Well, and it was kind of a serendipitous time just in terms of our coming together. And there was this kind of meeting of the minds at that conference. For me, I had come into the field at the end of 2005, and I had exactly the same kind of experience that Ken and Jeanette was having, which is I came from the Symphony Orchestra League that had an association of symphony orchestras across the country. And we had a network and we talked to each other and we had, email chains and phone calls, and we got together for annual conferences. And so there was this network built. And I remember coming into the Japanese garden field from that and realizing that if I wanted to know my peers, I had to go to every Japanese garden in the country. I had to travel. And in fact, I did this. I remember coming in my first year in Portland and doing what I called my perspective tour, trying to gain perspective of the field. Where were we in this field and who else was in the field, and just hopping around the country to have a chance to meet some peers. So I was in the same place. There's no connection of the field. In 2008, I was selected to go to Japan as part of the International Affairs Fellowship with the Council on Foreign Relations. And my work that I decided to do was to study these gardens as venues for grassroots foreign relations. And as I got over to Japan and started looking at the Japan side, I realized that while there was some connection in Japan, they weren't really entirely connected either. And certainly North America field and the Japan field were not connected at all. There were a few of us, you know, Ken and I and a few others who had some singular connections, but as a field, we weren't certainly connected. So I remember it was the conference in Long Beach when Ken and Jeanette reached out to me and said, hey, we're doing this conference. I think it was in the spring of '09, if I remember correctly. And would you come and give one of the, you know, give a speech, give a talk at the conference? And at that point, I was just finishing up my paper, my project on what I had just spent the last 6 months studying, which was the network, or the lack of a network in the Japanese garden field. At the same time that, of course, Ken and Jeanette were having the same, you know, idea that, hey, this conference is important because it's the first bringing together in a while of the field at all. And so I think the three of us huddled together in a room one day. I gave you guys a copy of my paper, and we all looked each other in the eye and said, we need to do something here. We all share the sense that something needs to happen. And I think that conference and that huddling was kind of the birth